Sota DAF Lamed Bet, the poetry of perspective, Shira. It can be very stressful when you're trying to build a jigsaw puzzle and you've got all the pieces lying around and the picture isn't emerging yet, you're not seeing where the pieces fit in, you've just got the pieces separately. And then when the thing comes together and you've actually got the picture that is formed from all the pieces coming together and you've got the whole puzzle and you can see it in front of you, there's a moment of great joy, and that's part of what motivates people to do jigsaw puzzles, because it's a very joyous moment when you're able to see it all come together in that particular way. And in life also, a lot of the time we see the pieces. And that's very frustrating because we don't see how the pieces fit together. It's looking like a mess. You look at what's happening in Israel at the moment, what's happening in the whole world at the moment. They're just jigsaw pieces all over the world and we can't see how they come together. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a mechanism to be able to bring them together, to understand how the pieces fit together? And that's what we learn about in today's sugya that deals with the parsha of Shira, the song that Moshe and Bnei Israel sang when after the Red Sea had split and they were saved and the Egyptians were killed. And we have the posuk that we say every day, Az yashir Moshe Bnei Israel et hashira hazot laHashem vayomru lemor. Then Moshe and Bnei Israel sang the song to Hashem and they said, saying, Hashir laHashem ki ga'oga, and then comes the whole Shira. There are two questions that we'll deal with today with respect to the Shira. The one is, if you look at the way the Shira is written in the Torah, it appears as if the words Az yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael et hashira hazot laHashem are already part of the Shira, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because that's an introductory statement. It says, then Moshe and Yisrael sang this Shira, and they said, saying, and that should be a colon, new paragraph, beginning of Shira, the beginning of the poem. And Shira is probably more a poem than a song, by the way. It's more poetry than it is song. Shir is song. Shira is poetry. So this is where does the poem start? Az yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael et hashira hazot is narrative, and then Ashira laHashem ki ga'oga is the beginning of poetry. That's where it should be, but it doesn't work that way. That's the first question. The second question is, we'll see in the Gemara and Megillah on Daf Yud, talks about the fact that the Malachim also wanted to sing, the angels wanted to sing as well, and Hashem stops them and says, my creatures are dying in the sea and you're singing. So why didn't he stop the Jewish people as well? Why are we praised for singing and we use that shira in our tefillah every day? Why is that okay? What is it that we could do at the sea that angels couldn't do? What is this human capacity that we have that angels didn't have? Rashi says on Az Yashir, because grammatically it's a little bit confusing. Rashi's the master grammarian that always comments when there's a grammatical difficulty in the Torah, and that's Az is past tense, Yashir is future tense. Az means then, Yashir means will sing. How does that work? So explains Rashi, Az k'shira'ah hanes, at that moment, at that moment that they saw the miracle in the past tense, Allah belibo yashir shira. It again, this is still telling us the story. They were moved to poetry in their hearts. That's what it means. Az yashir. Then they were moved to say a poem, to compose a poem. Aval midrasho, but the Chazal say mikan remez litchiyat hametim min haTorah, that this talking about the future, as in then yashir. This will be a song that the Jewish people will sing forever, even to tchiyat hametim, even into the future. What does Rashi mean? Why does Rashi bring that in, and what does it mean? Let's have a look and see. Says the Mishnah, back on Daf Chav Zayin, on which our Gemara is based, Bo b'yom, on that same day, as we learned yesterday, when Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was made the Nasi, on that day, Rabbi Akiva also gave the following drosha. Az yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael et hashira hazot laHashem vayomru lemor, she'en Talmud lomar lemor. What does lemor mean? Ma Talmud lomar lemor? Melamed shayu Yisrael onim shira acharav shel Moshe al kol davar v'davar kekorin et hallel. It teaches us what actually happened there. Moshe was the chazan. He was the shliach tzibur. And Bnei Israel were the tzibur. There was a statement and answer, like we say in Hallel. The chazan says, the community answers. And that's how this took place. It was a responsive poem, where the shliach tzibur, Moshe Rabbeinu, and Klal Yisrael said it responsively. No, this is not like we read Hallel. This is like we read Shema. We'll see what that means. Says the Gemara on our daf on Lamed Amud Bet, Tanu Rabbanon Bo b'yom dorosh Rabbi Akiva b'sha'ah she'alu Yisrael min hayam. Look at these words carefully. Natnu einehem lomar shira. They applied their eyes to saying poetry. What have the eyes got to do with this? Rashi says Allah belibo. Rashi on Chumash says it in their heart. They were ignited in their heart. That I understand. What's the right way, a name they gave their eyes? The Ketzad Amru Shira, how did they do it? We have different views in the Gemara. Rabbi Nechemia Omer kesofer hapores al shema beveit hakneset. We're talking about, it's not Kriyat Shema, we're talking about Pores, al Kriyat Shema. Pores al Kriyat Shema means Baruch Hu. So what Rabbi Nechemia is saying, it's like the Chazan and the Tzibur with Baruch Hu. The Chazan says Baruch Hu, and then what does the Tzibur say? They don't repeat what the Chazan says. They say Baruch Hashem Uvarach L'Olam Vayed. They say a different pasuk. So Rabbi Nechemia's chidush is, this wasn't Moshe saying and them repeating, like sometimes we say when we say Tehillim B'tzibur. The Chazan says a pasuk, we all repeat the pasuk. Chazan says the pasuk, we all repeat the pasuk. No, says Rabbi Nechemia, that's not what happened. What happened is Moshe said a piece and they answered differently. Shehu poter tchila v'heinoni machrav. He starts and then they answer. Tan Rabbanu Dorosh Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili gave his drosha on Pasha Shira, and he said, "B'sha'ah shel Yisro min hayam natnu einehem lomar Shira." Again, we see natnu einehem. So we've got it in Rabbi Akiva, and we've got it in Rabbi Yossi Haglili. So this word natnu einehem, they applied their eyes, is very important. The Ketzad Amru Shira. How did they do it? Olel mutalal b'keim amor. A little infant was on its mother's knees, lap. V'tinok yonek b'shtei imor, and a little baby was sucking from the mother's breast. Kivan shira'u et hashchina, when these little babies saw the Shechina, again we see eyes. Olel igbiat tzavaro v'tinok shamat dado mipiv, the little baby on the lap lifted up his head, and the baby pulled away from the breast. V'amru zeh keli v'anveyu, and these little babies all said zeh keli v'anveyu. This that we can see, ra'u et hashchina, this that we can see, you can point to it, zeh keli, this is our God v'anveyu. That's what happened at the Shira. And here's the Gemara in Megillah Daf Yud that we talked about. Bikshu malachei asharet lomar Shira, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Maaseh yadai tovim b'yam v'atem omrim Shira. My children are dying in the sea, and you're saying Shira. How can that be? And we ask, how's it okay for the Bnei Israel to do that? So Tosfos is important on Rabbi Nechemia because he brings a Tosefta. So we've talked about the Tosefta is very authoritative. It's Braisa, it's time of the Mishnah, wasn't included in the Mishnah, but is very, very authoritative. And the Tosefta in Perek Vov of Sota says, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kibnei Adam shekurim et Shema shneimar vayomru lemor, melamed shayam Moshe poter tchila v'Yisro onim achrav v'goimrim. So you see that Moshe, this is Rabbi Nechemia, so that's consistent with what we've learned. Moshe opens Bnei Yisrael continue v'goimrim. But look what Tosfos brings in the name of the Tosefta. Moshe Amar Az Yashir Moshe v'Yisrael Omrim Ashir Al Hashem. So the Chazan gets up. What's the first thing the Chazan says? Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael Tashir Azot LaHashem v'yamru le'mor. Then the Tzibur answered Ashir Al Hashem, and that's why the Shira is written in poetic form from Az Yashir, because that's where it started. That's where the Chazan started this whole thing. Az Yashir Moshe v'nei Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu is the Chazan. Moshe Amar Aziv Zimat Yav. Moshe says Aziv Zimat Yav. Yisrael Omrim Zeh Kili V'anveyu. Explains the Netziv in the Merumei Sodeh, and that's why this is part of the Shira, because the whole thing had to have done B'nevuah. This had to have been done with Ruach HaKodesh. How did they know what Moshe was going to say? Moshe starts a word, and the Tzibur know what to say. They don't have a Siddur. There's no Azir. It wasn't published yet. Nobody had a copy of it. Imagine you go to a concert and there's a singer there who's singing a song for the first time. He's just composed it. And he sings the first few lines, and then everybody in the concert answers. And they continue. And he says the next one, they continue. How could that happen? How could they know what's in his mind to sing? So clearly there was an alignment of Ruach HaKodesh. What Moshe had in his mind, the poem that Moshe was composing in his mind, that same poem they had in their minds. Thousands and thousands of Jewish people, even the little babies. Each one was able to compose the same poem at the same moment. That's an amazing moment of Ruach HaKodesh. This is an unbelievable moment in human history, not just in Jewish history, when you could have these hundreds of thousands of people all composing a poem simultaneously with the same words. That's unbelievable Ruach HaKodesh. And that's why the Netziv says, when Moshe starts, that's the poem. Az Yashir Moshe uvenei Yisrael et Ashira azot LaHashem Yomru le'mor. Says Moshe, this is an amazing moment that I, Moshe, and the whole of Klal Yisrael are going to, and now we're about to sing the same song. That's the beginning of the Nevuah. That's the beginning of the prophecy. That's where it all starts. That opening sentence is key to understanding the whole episode of the Shira, the way that we understand it. So what is this that they saw? As an aside, there's a statement in the Tikkunei Zohar. The Tikkunei Zohar is not the Zohar itself. But it's a Zohar. It's written also by Rabbi Shimon Yochai. We've got it together with the Zohar. It was made available. We knew about it about the same period. Published around the 16th century. But it's mainly on the first pasuk of the Torah. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz. It's the Tikkunei HaZohar is chapters and chapters that deal just with that from a Kabbalistic perspective. And the Zohar says in passing, Leiv mevin, the heart can understand. Leiv yodea, the heart can know things. You know things not only with your mind, you know things intuitively with your heart as well. Leiv ro'eh, a heart can also see. And that's the key to this whole sugya. That we need to understand when it talks about they saw, natnu einehem, they lifted up their eyes, as Rabbi Yossi Aglili says. Natnu einehem lomar shira, as Rabbi Akiva says. Natnu einehem are the eyes of the heart. You can see with your heart as well. We're very lazy. We don't know how to use our hearts. We don't know how to use our hearts to remember. We don't know how to use our hearts to feel. We don't know how to use our hearts to know, to understand. And we don't know how to use our hearts to see. What is it that you can see with your heart that you can't see with your eyes? You see, with your eyes, you can only see what's in front of you. You can't see beyond what's in front of you. The eyes already give some perspective. Because if you hear, you can only hear what's really happening in the moment. But if you look, you can look from a distance, and you can see a bigger perspective. You can go onto a mountain. Moshe Rabbeinu went onto the mountain before he died, and you can see the whole of Eretz Yisrael. One can see perspective in a way that you can't see without vision. But vision also means more than that. Vision means to be able to see into the future. If you see with your heart, you can see massive perspective. If you see with your heart, you can see historic perspective. You can expand your vision enormously. If you're using your physical eyes, you can only see the physical things in front of you. But if you allow yourself to see with your intuition, if you allow yourself to see inside your heart, and you just ask yourself, what am I seeing? What am I looking at? Not with my eyes, but what am I looking at with my heart? What you see is much bigger. Now you've got vision. You've not just got sight. You've got vision. Sight is only what's in front of you. Vision is a much wider and a much bigger perspective. And that's what, when the Zohar says, Leiv yodea, Leiv mevin, Leiv yodea, and Leiv ro'eh. And that's what the Gemara means when it says they see. That was the Ruach HaKodesh, that they could see with their hearts. And when they see with their hearts, they can see a whole perspective. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says on the Shira as well, on the word shiur, he says a shiur is to express in words what's happening deep in your heart. But then he says something really important. Mikan sheshir mitzayin berosh uberishona et hadibur b'shir al poel Hashem behistoria. A shiur happens when you can see Hashem's hand in history. Then you sing. When history is difficult to understand and events are difficult to make sense of, and the puzzle pieces aren't fitting together, there's no song. All of a sudden it fits together and you see the Yad Hashem. We've just celebrated Yom Ha'atzmaut. Yom Ha'atzmaut happened 3 years after the Shoah. 3 years after the Shoah. After the Shoah there was devastation. Then comes Eretz Yisrael, and we put Eretz Yisrael together, and we can see history starting to unfold, and now after 75 years we see the hand of Hashem more and more and more. It's beginning to make sense. And then we sing, we celebrate. Why do we celebrate? Many people said Hallel on Yom Ha'atzmaut. Why? Why are you saying Hallel? What are you singing about? Because you can see Poel Hashem behistoria. When you see the hand of Hashem in history, you sing. But what's important to understand is history doesn't only mean in the past. History means in the future as well. The fact is, with your physical eyes, you can only look backwards. You can't look forward, but when you can see forward, when you can understand history forward and backwards, that's a completely different level of shira. That's a different level of Ruach. That's what Ruach HaKodesh is. That's what Nevuah is. And Novi sees the whole thing. He can see it from beginning to end. From the very beginning to the very end, and he can see how it all fits together. That's what a Novi does. That's Ruach HaKodesh. You can see the thing playing out, not only in the past, but you've got a vision of the future. And when you can see the past and the present and a vision of the future, you sing, you're happy. That's shiur, you create poetry. And the Sifri says in Dvorim, the Ramban in Parshas Ha'azinu brings the Sifri. Gedolah shira zu sheyesh ba. This shira is very great. It's talking about Ha'azinu, but the same applies to our Parsha shira. Sheyesh ba achshav, v'yesh ba l'shavar, v'yesh ba la'atid lavo. In the song there is past, there's present, and there's future, and that's why it's a shir. That's why it's a shira, that's why it's poetry. Because narrative only tells you what happened. That once upon a time is how you start a story. That's how you start narrative. But a poem is not about what happened. A poem is about what will happen. A poem is about what could happen. Poetry is completely different. That's what shiur means. So when Rashi says, at that moment they wanted to make a shiur. And Chazal say in the Medrash, Remez litchiyat hamitim. How far forward are they seeing? They're seeing all the way forward to a future world of Tchiyas HaMeisim. They see the whole of history playing out, from Breshit bara Elokim to Tchiyat HaMeitim, and they see where this fits in the whole picture of the shiur, and now we can sing. And I refer you to the shiur that I gave on Purim, on the difference between comedy and tragedy. By the way, we have 2 YouTube channels. There's a YouTube which is Rabbi Lapin on the general shiurim, and the Purim shiur is there. And we have a YouTube on Matmonim, which is the Matmonim. On the Purim shiur, I spoke about the difference between comedy and tragedy, and the fact that tragedy is when you take a narrow view, you see what's happening in the moment. It's very sad. But when you see the full perspective, it becomes comedy. When you take a long shot, as Charlie Chaplin said, it becomes comedy. It becomes funny. It becomes joyful. It becomes light. And that's what shiur is. Shiur is taking a long view, where you've got in it l'sha'avar, la'atid, v'yesh bo l'sha'avar, v'yesh bo la'atid lavo, yesh lo ba'alam hazeh. You've got achshav, you've got avar, you've got atid lavo, you've got past, present, future. You've got it all, you've got full perspective. That's an opportunity for poetry. That's the time that you sing. And that's something we've all got to try and do when things are difficult and things aren't making sense. They're not making sense because we're looking at puzzle pieces. We've got to refer to our hearts. We've got to try and see, not with our eyes, because with our eyes we can only see what's in front of us, and with front of us there are disconnected pieces of puzzle. But if you can allow ourselves to just go deeper, take a deep breath, and take a vision of where history has come from, and what we believe is the vision for history for the future, things start folding together and a pattern starts forming, and we're able to sit back and enjoy the Ruach HaKodesh, that insight that allows us to sing and to compose poetry.